Before the world ever heard your laughter, before anyone ever celebrated your victories, before any person ever noticed your strength, heaven saw your wounds. Not the wounds people talk about, not the wounds others can point at, but the quiet wounds, the ones that never bleed outside, the ones that never scream loud enough for others to hear, the ones that hide behind your eyes, even when your mouth says, "I'm okay." There is a pain that sits in the private chambers of the soul, a pain that wears no bandage, yet drains strength like a leaking vessel. It is the pain you carry into sleep and wake up still holding, the pain you disguise with a smile, but your spirit still feels the weight of it. The pain you pray about silently because explaining it to people would cost you more energy than the hurt itself. And God says today, I am coming for the wounds no one sees. There are moments when life does not break you loudly. It breaks you quietly. It breaks you in the places where applause cannot reach, where encouragement cannot touch, where advice cannot heal. It breaks you in the shadows. And when the breaking happens in the shadows, the healing too must come from the realm of light. There are memories that still sting, words you overheard that still bruise, betrayals you survived but never processed, expectations that collapsed and left a silent crater in your heart. Times you were strong for people who should have held you up instead, yet you carried it all, silently. And heaven says, today I touch the silent wounds. Today I breathe on the hidden fractures. Today I release healing fire into the pain behind your strength. Some wounds do not weaken your body. They weaken your confidence, your peace, your identity, your hope, your trust, and your voice. But the God who formed your inward parts heals the inward places. No wound is too buried for his fire. No pain is too old for his hand. No memory is too quiet for his mercy to hear. This is not just another message. This is a spiritual interruption, a divine appointment. Heaven steps into the room where your heart hurts in silence. Stay with me, because before this message ends, every hidden wound inside you will encounter the healing fire of God. If this message is already speaking to the forgotten corners of your heart, stay locked in. Subscribe to Fire of Restoration so you never fight your silent battles alone again. More revelations, more healing, more restoration is coming. Let's walk this journey together. There are battles that happen in front of people, and there are battles that happen behind your face. The hidden ones. The ones you never had the vocabulary to explain. The ones you never found the right person to confide in. The ones you carried long enough that you began to believe silence was the only safe place to bleed. Hidden pain has a strange way of reshaping a person. It can make you laugh louder so no one hears you breaking. It can make you serve harder so no one sees you trembling. It can make you strong in public but unsure of yourself when you're alone. It can make you avoid deep conversations because someone might accidentally touch the wound you kept stitched with fragile threads. Some of your greatest battles were never visible, not because they weren't devastating, but because you learned how to function while hurting. You learned how to work while empty, smile while wounded, encourage others while your own spirit felt tired. You mastered the art of appearing whole while quietly asking God, when will this ache finally heal? You didn't ask for this pain. You didn't choose these scars. You didn't sign up for the disappointments that rewrote parts of your heart. But you survived them. Even if the survival left fractures, nobody noticed. There were moments where people celebrated your strength, but they never knew your strength came from nights of private tears. There were days you encouraged others with words you desperately needed someone to speak back to you. There were seasons where your soul walked with a limp, but life demanded you walk as though nothing was heavy. And yet heaven saw it all. Every time you swallowed words, you wished someone could understand. Every time you forced hope into a tired heart. Every time you showed up, even when the weight inside felt like it was crushing you. God says, I did not forget the nights you cried in whispers. I did not overlook the pain you could not articulate. I did not ignore the wounds that were too deep for human comfort. Hidden pain is dangerous, not because it kills instantly, but because it quietly drains strength until you start dimming your own value. You begin to question your worth. You start thinking maybe you expect too much from people. You start believing maybe your joy is too fragile to maintain. You start accepting exhaustion as normal. You start carrying burdens that were never meant to be carried alone. But today, the divine physician steps into the silent war within you, not to judge your struggle, but to heal what you've been too tired to even describe. Heaven is not intimidated by the wounds you hid. Heaven is not ashamed of the tears nobody saw. Heaven is not disappointed by the weight you carried alone. Heaven moves toward the brokenhearted with fire, not to burn you, but to cleanse the pain that has weakened you for years. This is where your healing begins, not in the open, not on the surface, but in the deepest chambers of your silent suffering. There are wounds that happen suddenly, and wounds that happen slowly. Some pain hits like lightning, swift, shocking, unforgettable. But other pain grows quietly, like a shadow expanding without your awareness. You didn't notice when it began. You didn't realize when it deepened. You only recognized it when you looked inside and saw parts of yourself shaped by things you never asked for. Some of the wounds you carry today were not caused by one event, but by a series of unspoken hurts that piled up one on top of another. Unmet expectations, repeated disappointments, silent betrayals, moments where your value was overlooked. Times you poured out love but received indifference. Days where you hoped for understanding but met only silence. And slowly, without permission, those moments sculpted your heart. You became more cautious, more guarded, more private, more selective with your vulnerability, more protective of the parts of you that once trusted freely. Hidden pain has a way of teaching lessons that feel like prison walls. You start believing that emotional distance is safety. You start thinking that vulnerability is a luxury you cannot afford. You build boundaries so thick that even kindness cannot climb over them. You begin expecting disappointment because hope has cost you too much. But hear this, God never created you to be shaped by wounds. He created you to be shaped by His Spirit, His love, His purpose, His fire. Not by trauma, not by silence, not by people who mishandled your heart. Some of your behaviors today aren't you. They are the echoes of the wounds you never healed. That hesitation you feel when someone tries to get close, that fear of depending on anyone, that habit of minimizing your emotions, that feeling of being unworthy of care, that recurring thought that you must carry everything alone. These are not your identity. They are the emotional footprints of old injuries. And God says, I am not healing you to make you who you were before the pain. I am healing you to make you who you were designed to be before the world wounded you. Your pain shaped you, but it did not define you. Your wounds influenced you, but they do not own you. Your scars speak, but they are not the final voice over your life. There is a version of you heaven still sees, the one untouched by disappointment, unburdened by betrayal, unscarred by people who failed to protect your heart. And today, God pulls you back into alignment with that original design. The hidden wounds that weakened you are about to become the places where divine strength flows. The broken areas you thought disqualified you are about to become the evidences of God's healing power. The pain you carried in silence is about to become the testimony that lifts others out of their own shadows. You are not the sum of your wounds. You are the sum of God's intention. And heaven has decided your healing begins now. There is a kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot fix, a heaviness that remains even after rest, a tiredness that does not sit in the muscles, but in the soul. It is the fatigue that comes from carrying burdens in silence, the emotional weariness that grows from healing yourself in shadows, the spiritual tiredness that forms when life never gave you space to be weak. You learned how to keep going, even when your heart was running on fumes. You learned how to smile, even when your soul felt thin. You learned how to push forward while something deep inside whispered, I don't know how much more I have left. And yet you continued, not because you were unbreakable, but because life didn't give you an option to pause. You kept showing up, not because everything was fine, but because stopping would have meant everything fell apart at once. People applauded your resilience without ever realizing it was survival, not strength. They praised your consistency without understanding that every day took a little piece of your emotional energy. They admired your endurance, but never saw the nights you held yourself together with prayers and silence. Sometimes the deepest tiredness comes from being strong for too long. You became the one everyone relied on, The one people vented to, the one who understood, the one who forgave quickly, the one who comforted without receiving comfort back, the one who poured out but rarely got poured into. You became the safe place for others while having no safe place for yourself. And that kind of strength, the silent, lonely, uncelebrated strength, drains the soul drop by drop. But God says, I am restoring the strength you lost in battles no one knows about. Heaven saw the moments you shrugged off pain so others wouldn't worry. Heaven saw the days you walked into responsibilities with a heavy heart. Heaven saw the times you helped others heal while your own heart was still bleeding. Heaven saw the courage it took to keep moving when you wanted to collapse. And heaven responds with restoration. Because emotional exhaustion is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign you've carried more than any human heart was designed to hold alone. God never intended for you to be everyone's healer while neglecting your own wounds. He never asked you to survive on empty while pretending to be full. He never called you to carry in silence what only his hands can fix. You've gone through seasons where your heart whispered, I can't do this anymore. But your responsibilities said, you have no choice. You've had moments where you prayed, not with strength, but with the last breath of faith you had left. You've had days where you kept living, not because you felt inspired, but because something inside wouldn't let you give up. God says, you will not collapse under this weight. I am lifting it. He's giving you rest where exhaustion lived, peace where anxiety grew roots, joy where heaviness took residence, strength where weakness told you were done, healing where hidden wounds drained you dry. There is a divine rest coming, not the kind that merely relaxes the body, but the kind that revives the soul, reawakens hope, restores passion, and renews identity. Your heart will breathe again. Your spirit will rise again. Your inner strength will return again. Your tears will not be your language forever. Your tiredness will not define the rest of your life. In this very moment, God is reaching into the deepest fatigue of your heart, and his healing fire is restoring what silent exhaustion took from you. There are wounds you learned to live with, not because they stopped hurting, but because you adjusted your life around them. You moved forward, but the pain moved with you. You grew older, but the wound grew quieter. Never gone, just buried. Some pains don't scream anymore, not because the wound is healed, but because the soul has learned how to mute itself. You stop talking about it. You stop remembering it intentionally. You stop expecting closure. You stop hoping for apologies. You stop replaying the moment. Yet the emotional imprint remains like a shadow on the inside. Life taught you how to function in places where you never fully healed. You learned how to trust, but not deeply. Love, but with caution. Believe, but with reservations. Hope, but with quiet fear. Speak, but selectively. Dream, but with guarded expectation. You learned how to cope, how to adapt, how to normalize emotional limping. But coping is not healing. Surviving is not restoration. Enduring is not wholeness. Some of the emotional habits you carry today are leftovers from wounds you never processed. The fear of disappointing people, the discomfort of being vulnerable, the tension you feel when someone gets too close, the instinct to hide emotions as soon as someone asks, are you okay? The urge to prove your worth even when no one is questioning it. These are not personality traits. These are survival mechanisms. And heaven says, you outgrew the season, but the wound remained. Today, I heal what your strength carried for too long. There are parts of you that grew up, while other parts of you got stuck at the moment of the wound. You moved into new environments, new seasons, new responsibilities. But emotionally, a fragment of you never left the place where the pain began. Not because you were weak, but because God reserved the healing for a divine moment like this one. You didn't know how to heal it. You didn't have the language to describe it. You didn't have someone who could understand it. So you simply lived, bravely, quietly, faithfully, while carrying something too precious for human hands to mend. And now heaven steps in. God goes to the childhood wound you never discussed, the heartbreak you minimized, the friendship that left you scarred, the promise that was broken, the rejection that made you question your worth, the disappointment that shaped the way you love. the abandonment that taught you to stay silent, even when you needed help. He places his hand gently on the wound you stopped acknowledging and says, "You don't have to pretend anymore. I am healing this." His healing doesn't just cover the wound. It reverses the emotional impact. It restores the confidence you lost. It rewires the beliefs the pain created. It frees the version of you trapped in old emotions. It uncovers the strength hidden under years of coping. It releases the unspoken sorrow you pushed down to stay functional. This is where you stop managing pain and begin living healed. This is where God pulls the root, not just the symptoms. This is where the emotional patterns shaped by trauma are replaced with patterns shaped by divine wholeness. Heaven is not just healing what hurt you. Heaven is restoring who you were before it hurt you. There comes a moment in every believer's journey when God stops addressing the surface and begins touching the root. Because beneath your reactions, beneath your habits, beneath your silence, beneath your strength, there is a deeper place where the real wound lives. And God does not heal symptoms. He heals foundations. Some of the emotions you battle today are not random. They are connected to something deeper, something you buried because you weren't ready to face it or didn't know how to. But God knows that true healing begins when the root is exposed, not to condemn you, but to free you. There is a root behind your fear of being misunderstood, a root behind your hesitancy to trust, a root behind your sudden overwhelm in moments of pressure, a root behind the voice that it tells you you're not enough, a root behind your discomfort with receiving love, a root behind your need to stay strong even when you're hurting. These behaviors did not appear out of nowhere. They were formed in the soil of your unspoken experiences. And heaven says, "Today I bring light to the places where darkness tried to plant emotional poison. Hidden pain grows roots. Unhealed wounds create patterns. Silent suffering produces beliefs that feel true, but are built on lies. You're not actually afraid of love. You're afraid of being hurt again. You're not actually distant. You're protecting the parts of you that never healed. You're not hard to understand. You've simply learned that opening up costs more than silence. You're not weak. You're tired from carrying what no one saw. You're not cold. You're guarded because warmth was once punished. You're not emotionless. You're emotionally cautious because vulnerability once came with pain. And God says, "Let me show you the root so the fruit can finally change." He reaches into the depths of your emotional history. He touches the moment where the wound began. He shines light on the memory you outgrew but never processed. He reveals the lie that formed the belief that shaped the behavior that created the pattern that drained your strength. This is why God's healing is so powerful. He doesn't just fix what happened. He heals what it produced. He heals the version of you who felt unseen. He heals the version of you who cried silently. He heals the version of you who stopped trusting. He heals the version of you who questioned your worth. He heals the version of you who carried guilt that wasn't yours. He heals the version of you who learned to expect disappointment. He heals the version of you who forgot what genuine peace feels like. And when God heals the root, everything in your life begins to shift. The fear loses its grip. The insecurity begins to melt. The emotional triggers stop controlling you. The heaviness you carried for years begins to loosen. The patterns you thought were your personality begin to break. The walls you built begin to soften. The strength you lost begins to return. The voice you silenced begins to rise. Because true healing is not when you no longer remember the pain. It's when the memory no longer controls you. And today, heaven uproots every emotional seed planted by trauma, disappointment, and betrayal. God is not just touching the wound. He's rewriting the entire emotional narrative connected to it. This is deeper than recovery. This is deeper than repair. This is deeper than comfort. This is transformation, where the God of restoration enters the hidden chambers of your heart and becomes the surgeon of your soul. There comes a moment when heaven refuses to let you continue carrying what has secretly weakened you. A moment when the divine hand that formed your heart becomes the hand that restores it. A moment when God says, enough. This wound ends here. For years, you survived with pain that never had language. You carried emotional fractures that no one acknowledged. You protected your broken places because vulnerability once cost you too much. You stitched your wounds with silence because you didn't want to burden anyone. You operated in strength, but you lived with hidden trembling. And God watched every moment, not from a distance, but from the deepest chambers of your soul. Because no pain is too silent for him. No wound is too buried for him. No tear is too quiet for him. No ache is too old for him. The hidden wounds you carried shaped parts of you, but they did not escape the eyes of the one who created you. And today, God says, I step into the inner rooms where your pain sleeps. I walk into the shadows where your tears collected. I touch the places you stopped showing anyone, and I heal them with fire. This healing is not gentle because the pain was not gentle. It is not temporary because the wound was not temporary. It is not surface level because the hurt was not surface level. This healing is deep. This healing is thorough. This healing is supernatural. This healing is tailored specifically to the wounds you never had the strength to explain. Because God is not healing the you people see. He's healing the real you, the broken you, the honest you, the version of you that hides behind strength. He's binding the places where you fractured silently. He's restoring the confidence life tried to drain. He's reviving the joy you forgot how to feel. He's resurrecting the peace you buried under responsibility. He's repairing the trust you lost in moments that still echo in your memory. He's giving you back the voice that trauma quieted. He's lifting the heaviness that years of survival created. And heaven declares over you, you will not live another season bleeding internally while smiling externally. God replaces your survival mode with his strengths. He replaces your silent tears with divine reassurance. He replaces your emotional fatigue with supernatural rest. He replaces your guardedness with a healed identity. He replaces the patterns created by pain with patterns created by purpose. This is the moment you break free from wounds that followed you from childhood into adulthood. This is the moment you stop repeating emotional cycles that came from the past you never processed. This is the moment you step out of the identity shaped by hurt and step into the identity shaped by heaven. Your soul is not too complicated for God. Your emotions are not too messy for him. Your wounds are not too old for him. Your tears are not too late for him. Your heart is not too broken for him. God specializes in the healing no human can perform, the healing of hidden wounds, silent suffering, and emotional scars buried too deep for words. Today marks a spiritual reset, not a temporary relief, not a brief comfort, a reset where the God of restoration rewrites the emotional narrative of your life. The pain that weakened you loses its power today. The wounds that shaped your reactions are touched by divine fire today. The shadows that followed you are chased out by the light of God today. This is your moment. This is your restoration. This is your healing. This is the day heaven visits the wounds no one saw and heals them completely. If this message touched the wounds you never talk about, if you felt God reaching into the hidden places of your heart, then don't leave without connecting. Subscribe to Fire of Restoration. Here your healing continues. Here your hope rises again. Here your story is rewritten with fire. Stay with us. Your restoration journey has just begun.